Thanks, John. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. It's good to... All right. Thank you, I'm sure. Thank you. If you're brand new to the church, I'm your pastor. Welcome. Hi, I'm Robert. Davette and I, my wife, we've been on a trip to Asia for the last 3 weeks, a ministry trip. And I just want to take a moment and give you a little update and also encourage you and say thank you. As a church family, we want to be faithful to just join God in what He's doing in the world. And that goes well beyond our community. That goes out to the far reaches of the world, all different kinds of cultures. And as a church family, we try to take that seriously and invest in a lot of places. And part of that investment is not only sending people and sending funds and doing projects and sending short-term teams, but it's sending us to shepherd and encourage and pastor in these places with people that we got to spend time with 3 of our ministry partners, 3 of our missionaries. And 2 of them were sent out from this church. The other one we've been connected with for at least 20 plus years. And it's part of our ministry to be able to connect with them. So we went to Thailand, and while we were there, got to spend time with a whole team of missionaries because our ministry partner, they are the kind of the field leaders for Southern Asia. So this was their team. They pulled together people from Sri Lanka and India and Bangladesh and Thailand. The team itself was American, Canadian, German, Sri Lankan, Indian, all different kinds of backgrounds. Some Brits were there, just a whole international team trying to reach people in this area of the world. And they invited us to be, I was the main speaker, I guess you'd say. So we went through the book of Colossians and did some other things, got to spend some good time with them. Davette was able to lead a ministry time with the ladies. It was really fruitful. It was just a wonderful time. Not only did we get to minister on your behalf and on the Lord's behalf, but it really blessed us. Then we left that place in southern Thailand, went up to Bangkok for a short visit with our partners, the ministry team, the Lambs, and the church that they've started there. Got to meet some of their key leaders and spend some time with them. And then we went over to the border with Myanmar, and we were in, I guess it would be fair to describe it as an underground seminary. It was above ground, but they were trying to keep a low profile because technically it's not legal what they're doing, but it's really important serving the Lord. And there's thousands and thousands of Burmese refugees who have come into Thailand because of the turmoil in their homeland. And so some of them are being trained to be pastors and missionaries at this seminary. We got a chance to minister there, and Davette got a chance to minister. I got a chance to teach a class, and it was really a fruitful time. And then finally, we went south to Malaysia and spent some time there. Very different environment. One of our co-laborers there has been serving for quite some time and got to meet the team that they're involved with. And it was just really fruitful. Then we finally came back. Thank you for praying for us. We got back on Tuesday night, and I think I'm more or less coherent. If I start babbling in the middle of the sermon, it's probably just a little jet lag hitting me. But I think we're pretty well back. Very, very grateful to be here. Thank you for your prayers of encouragement and support for our safety, all of those things. The trip was smooth. It was not perfect. We had a couple of flight delays, but we made all of our connections that we needed to. I had a little bout with food poisoning, which was unpleasant, of course, but I'm fine. It didn't really mess things up. There was actually one day that was not scheduled for stuff, and that happened to be when I got sick, so that all worked. As we do trips like this, we find God really blesses us as much as He works in the lives of other people. And we try to come away with a few things to ponder a little bit more, maybe meditate on and allow God to speak a little more deeply. And I know that while we were away last week, you spent time praying for the persecuted church around the world. very important focus, that we would remember that our experience is so much different than so many others of our brothers and sisters, and encourage and support them through prayer. And we were actually with people who were persecuted, who had struggles. Some of the teams were struggling with how they were going to do their ministry because the governments where they were clamping down. In Malaysia, it's actually constitutionally legal, but not practically legal. All the local laws say you can't preach for conversion and nobody can convert. And there's all these different scenarios where, the whole dynamic with the Burmese believers there, they're out of their country because of political persecution, but some of that's also because of their faith. And so it's a reminder and an encouragement and a challenge to say, wow, God has graced us. Let's celebrate and enjoy and delight in that, and let's be faithful to pray for those who are having a much more challenging time following the Lord. So thank you for praying, not just for us, but for your prayer time last Sunday. Also, it was a reminder to us of how important it is to be intentional in our faithfulness. At this stage in my life anyway, I've followed Jesus for a really long time, and so there's a certain kind of inertia towards just what he wants. And certainly I'm not perfect, and I have my struggles, but life kind of has these patterns and rhythms, and I want to finish well, but what I don't want to do is coast into that. And just because things are going along more or less in his direction doesn't mean that I have the kind of focus that I ought to. And interacting with especially the co-laborers that we had there, the missionaries, and how they have to be intentional and the work they have to put in order to continue to get the gospel out and continue to do their ministry was an encouragement and a challenge for me to say, okay, Lord, what do I need to tighten up on? What do I need to refocus on? Also reminded of the power of the gospel. While we were in Malaysia, I got a chance to meet with a guy who's a brand new believer. He first got onto the website the ministry has in late August. He first met with our ministry partner September 11th. Short time after that, he came to faith. He's going to be baptized along with two other Muslim background believers next Sunday there. And I got a chance to be part of the discipleship meeting, and our missionary said, here, you teach this part and I'll teach that part, and he translated. That was kind of fun. It's kind of amazing to be with this guy who's a brand new believer in a place where you're technically not supposed to be doing what we're doing, and we were actually sitting at a coffee shop in a mall doing this, right? Because everyone's going by doing their thing, and you just have normal conversation. When we prayed, though, I do admit that I was faithful not to bow my head and close my eyes, but to look around and pray, and nobody noticed anything. And here's this guy, 36-year-old guy, who's just come to faith and whose life's being transformed by the power of the gospel. And he comes from a very different background than you and I do, and yet the love of Jesus has affected his life, and it's changing everything. And it's easy for at least some of us, myself included, to take that for granted. I've followed Jesus for a long time. Some things can feel kind of commonplace, and we forget the power and the miracle and the beauty of what Jesus has done. And that was just a reminder, and it was an encouragement. So thank you for sending us, and thank you, Derek, for your kindness there, and for praying. And praise God. He's at work around the world, and we're grateful to be a part of that. If you have your Bible, would you open to the book of Proverbs, chapter 14, please? We're continuing our series. We have 3 more today and 2 more through the wisdom literature, and we're going to do another theme this morning. It's actually not what I wanted to preach. When the themes were laid out, each guy who got a theme was just pick whatever it is that you want to preach, and that'll be fine. And my heart initially went another direction, and it just seemed like, no, God was pointing me this direction instead. And so we're moving over here. I think this is what he wants for us, and my prayer and hope is always that we are just being responsive and that he's speaking to our particular need. Maybe this morning he's moved us to this text because he wants to say something in particular to you. I don't know, but I hope that we'll all be able to listen with hearts and ears and minds that are open to whatever God has. You know, it was I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years ago, I forget how long ago, I was pulling up to a corner just over near Imperial in Idaho. And there were a couple of trucks ahead of me that intuitively I just thought, something's wrong there. They're not at the corner just right, and we're coming at the stoplight. And sure enough, as I get close enough, I see that one of them's a little askew more than it should be. The door is open, and the guy that's supposed to be in that truck is over at the other truck. The other truck, windows are up, doors are obviously locked. Man and woman in there. The woman is on the phone with a concerned look on her face. Man is glaring at man outside who has apparently dumped his drink, or looked like chocolate shake, all over their car and is yelling at the top of his lungs, swearing a blue streak, pounding on the hood of their car. Their windshield has been shattered. It's like, wow, that's not normal behavior. But it's more and more actually normal behavior in certain contexts. We have a name for that, right? We know what that is. It's called road rage. It's a common enough experience. It expresses differently, but it's a common enough occurrence that we have a name for it. We call it road rage. And it's something that increases. Over the last 10 years, road rage-related shootings have increased 400%. That's crazy. Nearly a quarter of all the adults in the world would say they experience intense anger every single day. And nearly 2/3 of teens say they have struggled with anger. In the United States companies spent $359 billion on work conflict issues last year. Because we're mad at each other and can't figure out how to get along with each other, $359 billion was wasted. To put that in context, that would pay for the entire bill of the state of California next year. The entire budget, and beyond the budget, all the other expenses would be covered by that. And you could throw in Hawaii and Alaska just for good measure. That's how much anger we have to deal with in the workplace. It's, I think, 24%. Let me look at it here real quickly. 24% of Twitter posts are what you might call rage posts. Facebook is 18%, because I have to have a little more space to show you pictures of my hamburger and how cute I am in this outfit. Right, so think about it, Facebook, 1 in 5. So here's a picture of my hamburger. Here's how cute I am in this outfit. Here's my dessert. Here's happy birthday to you. Here's my rage post. And I start all over again. That's crazy. That's crazy, and yet that's the world we live in. I don't have to convince you. You live there, you know. What's really troubling, not only is that dynamic, but when that dynamic gets close to home. When real anger issues are close to home. When you're working for the boss who seems nice in other contexts, but is an absolute beast. When out in public, you're the nice mom or the nice dad, but behind closed doors, you're monster mom and demon dad. And the dynamics that creates in your home. When you have somebody that you love who has no control over their anger. When your neighbors are out of control, pick the context. Whether it's you or it's somebody else, most of us have had occasions, some of us pretty extraordinary occasions, where the out of control anger around us is doing such damage. And the anger dynamic that we experience is not honoring to God. Remember, when Jesus was asked to boil it down, say, if I just had to focus on one thing, Jesus, what would it be? He said, okay, I'll give you 2. Love the Lord your God with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. That is diametrically opposed to this culture of anger. Remember, in 1 Corinthians 13, where he begins to unpack just a few of the characteristics of love. His love is patient, love is kind, goes on down the list. Love is not easily angered. And as we look in the book of Proverbs, there's a lot to say about anger. We're going to focus most especially on Proverbs 14. So if you want to turn there, join me in Proverbs 14, verse 29. That's our key verse, and then we'll look at a few other things along the way. It says this: whoever is slow to anger has great understanding, but he who has a hasty temper exalts folly. This section of Proverbs that's filled with all these, couplets and one-liners, these little zingers of, wow, there's a bit of wisdom here and a bit of wisdom there. And it's easy to read them and go, oh, yeah, that's insightful, and move on instead of slowing down and really trying to understand what it's saying here. It says, if I'm slow to anger, I have great understanding. Well, I need to remember how Proverbs speaks of the whole cluster of words surrounding wisdom, understanding, insight. That whole cluster of words is bigger than just, oh, I get it. It's being able to see things rightly, see them well, have insight into them, and respond properly to them, have insight into the prudent way to move forward, and the skill to do that. In other words, this is a really big statement to say, I will have great understanding. It's to say, one of the markers, one of the necessary things for me to succeed in life, to thrive, to be who it is that God is calling me to be, is that I have a handle on anger. And if I don't have a handle on anger, it says I exalt folly, which is exactly the opposite. It is the futile, it is the foolish, it is the empty, it is the destructive, it is the waste. And it's saying, look, here's a choice. Would you like to have the good life, as God would define it? Or would you like to have a life that's in shambles, that's a train wreck, that's totally messed up? You have a choice. And at least in this context, that choice centers on how do you handle your passion? How do you handle irritation, frustration, struggle, things that you're not happy with? How do you handle anger? Are you slow to get angry? Do you have a hair trigger fuse? How do you do that in a culture that is seething in anger, that uses anger as a manipulative tool, and that holds up anger as a virtue, and that calls people that aren't angry somehow compromisers or cowards, and doesn't recognize that that's probably not the best way to look at it? And in fact, the anger may not be such a virtuous thing. It may just be self-indulgent and sinful. But the culture we live in has flipped all these things around, and that's where we live. We have our own issues to deal with. Some of us have real anger issues. Some of us have been impacted by people with real anger issues. What do I do with that? Some of us, maybe that's not defining. This is one of the reasons why it didn't just strike me immediately. This is, if you talk to people that know me, I'm just confident nobody would say, oh, Robert's got a real anger problem. That's just not me. Right? When it was a number of years ago, one of my daughters looked at me, and it took me off guard, actually. She's a young adult, and she looked at me and said, Dad, I don't believe I can remember you ever being angry in my whole life. Like, wow, I wonder how many people could say that. This is my daughter. So she left the room, and I'm just kind of sitting there going, whoa. And then she came back and said, oh, wait. Oh, wait. Yeah, of course. I'm human, and I have my issues. It's probably not the one that rises to the surface. If you made the top 10 list of things that I really need to focus on, this is not there. But you know what? I have my moments, I have my triggers, I have my vulnerabilities, and it's still critically important. And I share that not to say, isn't it great who I am? I share that to say, you may not really have a defining issue with anger, but you're human. And anger is something that we all deal with, and we need to deal with it in a godly fashion because it is so destructive if we don't. Some of us know that. We own it. It's like, man, my life has been destroyed by my temper or somebody else's. Some of us may have a more or less pretty good handle on it, but there's still much for us to wrestle with. And what Solomon here, what the Spirit of God is telling us, is that if I'm slow to get angry, oh, there's such blessing that comes from that. There's such wisdom there's great understanding, insight, skill, the ability to navigate life the way that I need to. And if I don't, if I allow myself to go off, that's really destructive. I'm ultimately exalting folly. Let's look at a couple of other verses that'll flesh it out maybe just a little bit more, and then we'll look beyond Proverbs, because as Charlie pointed out last week, the wisdom literature is kind of rooted in the creation story, right? It's rooted, so it's the kind of things that you can come up with in common grace. You can talk to psychologists or sociologists, and they'll come up with a lot of the same things. However, this goes beyond that because this is revelation from God. So not only is this stuff you might kind of surmise, we actually know this is the truth because God said so, and this is intended to be read with that in mind and then in the larger context. So in a minute, we'll look at some of the larger context as well. But right now, let's just flesh out a little bit more of what is here in the Proverbs. So we're told that, if you're slow to anger, there's great understanding. If you flip over to chapter 16, verse 32, he gives another good picture. Whoever's slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city, right? It's better to have control of my anger than it is to be able to conquer. Now, I'm not really interested in conquering, but remember who's writing this. This is Solomon, who is the king of an up-and-coming regional empire. Conquest, power, the ability to take the city is like one of the pinnacle things he could think about. And he's saying, if I can control my anger, if you can control your anger, if you're slow to anger, you actually have more power to live life. You have more good for what you need than the guy that can conquer the city. That's a pretty high statement. He's saying this is really, really good. Who wouldn't want to have that result? Well, if you want that result, you got to deal with your heart. He also fleshes out a whole lot of the negative side of this too. If you want to turn over to chapter 25. Verse 28. A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. Well, he's a mess. He's destroyed. He's vulnerable. He's a victim. That's like the worst thing you could think of. And that's what it's like not having self-control. Or look over in chapter 29, verse 22. A man who stirs up strife and one given to anger cause much transgression, right? If I am this agitated person, if I'm this angry person, if I give expression to that, I will create strife where I go. Have you ever noticed that? I remember years ago I was involved in a leadership team with one particular guy who had a real anger problem. And it would just change everything when he walked into the room, and it didn't change for better. It just made a mess. It says not only that will they stir up strife, but they'll actually cause transgression. Out of that boiling, seething strife will come transgression. The one who's angry will sin, other people will sin. It's just going to promote that. It's going to bring devastating results because it makes such a mess. Or how about turning over to chapter 14, verse 17. A man of quick temper acts foolishly. Right? It's just like the guy who's pounding on the neighboring truck and he's spilled his drink, right? You could have drank that, but you spent money on it, now you dumped it on the guy's truck. You're smashing his hood. You smashed his windshield. You probably, I don't know. I don't know if the people who were in the other truck had done anything. They may have been completely innocent, or they may have done something to trigger this. But the most likely scenario that would trigger this is somebody cut somebody off, somebody got in the way, and you can't do that, probably because I'm running late. Well, you thought you were running late when you got cut off, when you stopped at the corner, jumped out of your car, dumped your drink, started pounding on the hood, pounding on the windshield, waiting for the woman to call the police that would take you away in handcuffs. That probably slowed you down even just a little bit more. How foolish. How ridiculous. The things that we will do, the things that we will say, the way that we think when we're angry. Right? If you look at the end of the book of Jonah, there's a wonderful scriptural example. And when my life looks like the people in Scripture, I have to ask the question of, is this the person I want it to look like? Now, if it's what the 3-year-olds say, the answer is Jesus. That's always right. I want it to look like Jesus. I don't want it to look like Jonah. Read the end of Jonah. He's gone in as God's prophet, preached in the great city, and they've repented. God was going to destroy Nineveh, and then he's not going to, and Jonah gets really ticked off. And he's so mad. And he says, God, I knew you were going to do, just kill me. And God says, this is my paraphrase, but this is exactly what's going on. Really? Really? That's where we are? And Jonah leaves the city and he's all mad. And then they have the conversation again on the hillside. And God says, are you really doing well by being this mad? And he says, yes, mad even enough to die. Like, I think that may have crossed the line beyond rational. That's just stupid. That is so foolish. Why does he hate the Ninevites so much? Because they've inflicted pain and death on his people. And now God's forgiven them, so instead God inflict pain and death on me? That doesn't make any sense. I've seen people just overturn their lives because of their anger in a moment. That is so foolish. He's saying, look, that's what happens. And not only do you make a mess, it's something that's going to recur. Look over to Proverbs chapter 19. Proverbs 19, verse 19. A man of great wrath will pay the penalty. It's going to come home to roost, right? He's going to suffer for it. But listen to the next line. If you deliver him, you will only have to do it again. The person that I love, my child, my parent, my spouse, my friend, because of their foolish anger has created a problem. And I love them, and I want to get them out of that. He's saying, don't bother. Don't bother trying to get them out of it, because they're just going to get back there again. Because the problem is not this circumstance. The problem is their heart. Because of their wrathfulness and their anger, it's just going to happen again. And after that, it's going to happen again. And then it's going to happen again. It's a recurring thing. And the thing about anger that is out of control, anger that's out of alignment with God, is it just spills everywhere. And the person that's usually hurt the most is actually me. Mark Twain said this, kind of a clever guy, maybe he should be a writer. Says this, anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured. You ever been around somebody that's totally eaten up with anger? Maybe you are. How much damage that's done? I don't know why she came to mind other than she's like the poster child in my mind of anger, but there was this woman in a church that David and I were a part of years ago. And I was just a young guy on staff, and she was obviously somebody eaten up with anger. I have no idea what happened in her life, but she was bitter and angry all the time. Right, one time, this is a tiny little church. We never had guests, never had visitors. One time, a visitor happened to show up and pulled into the parking lot right in front of her. We had just gotten out of our car, and we saw this whole thing unfold, and parked in the space, and she came screeching to a halt, jumped out of her car, and she's an elderly woman, very stately, kind of marching over to them, and just unleashed on them. You can't park here. This is my space, and la, 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 la. Welcome to church. Right? It's like, wow, what is going on here? We were in a meeting one time, and she stood up and tried to get me fired in the meeting. It's like, wow, I love you too. I don't know what's going on here. Right? And literally, I had nothing against her. In fact, David's like, I don't know what's going on. Maybe let's invite her over to dinner. Let's see if we can't, get to know her a little bit. And so David went up to her and said, we'd like to have you over for dinner. And she looked at her really harshly and said, I don't even know who you are. Oh, no, stop for a second. The church had, on a good day, 70 people. And there were 4 people in the church that were under the age of 70. Davette and I were 2 of those. I was on staff. She knew who we were. She was she was so miserable. You could just see it about her, everything. And I still don't know what happened with this woman, but I just wonder how much anger was allowed to seethe and fester and boil in your life so that you became like that. And at the end of the day, she robbed herself. She didn't get to know my wife, who is one of the truly great human beings God ever made. And I don't know what happened. Right here it says, we're just going to get into the same problem again and again and again. And we're going to be foolish, and we're going to create heartache, and sin is going to arise, and strife is going to come because I can't seem to get a handle on my anger. That verse really is critically important, and it asks a question for you and for me. Whoever is slow to anger has great understanding, but he who has a hasty temper exalts folly. Do you want that great understanding life, the fruitful one, the wise one, the one that aligns with God, the one where you have the insight and the ability and the skill to navigate the way God would want? Or, behind door number 2, a total train wreck that's just going to recur and recur and recur. And he's saying that's actually a choice that I make, and it has to do with how I handle anger. Come back to the original conversation. Some of us in the room know we have an anger problem. What are you going to do about it? This is the wisest man who ever lived, and by the way, he's writing under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, so this is actually what God says. He said, that is just going to do nothing but heartache and harm and destruction. What are you going to do about it? Some of you may not have a defining characteristic of anger, but there are certain zones, there's certain seasons, there's certain occasions, there's certain vulnerabilities, certain places where it or something, one of its ugly cousins comes along. Like, if you want to be honest with me, I'm still probably not going to get too angry in traffic. I'm going to get disdainful and dismissive of these low-life people who are surrounding me, right? That's just a dressed-up version. It's a little bit different, but it comes from the same place. In fact, I read one writer who suggested anger actually can function like a smoke alarm or a smoke detector, right? It's pointing to something. So when the anger pops up, it's like, okay, where's the fire? That's what I want to be asking. So the same fire can light fear, can light other things as well, but it's like I've got to deal with those heart issues. Anger is one of those signal indicators to say, better pay attention here. You may be here and you've actually been deeply harmed. You bear the scars of somebody else's anger. How are you dealing with that? How has the grace of God met you in that? Are there things that maybe you need to unpack, to be prayed for, things that will help you in that journey? Because this is a painful and devastating reality that some of us have been deeply harmed. Now, I think it's important as we think about anger to get the bigger picture here. And the first thing to note in our verse is whoever is slow to anger. It doesn't say whoever has no anger. It's whoever has slow anger. God's not saying no anger. He's saying slow anger. That's important. There is a time and a place where anger is an appropriate response. Occasionally, and I highlight the word occasionally, that shows up in Scripture as righteous indignation, right? There's a guy named Phinehas, and it doesn't say his anger, it talks about his zeal, but in that same context, it talks about God's anger that Phinehas' zeal picks up, and there's a guy that's going to sin very publicly, and Phinehas executes him on the Lord's behalf. It's like, whoa, what just happened, right? We're not messing around. There are occasions where things are wrong, and they need to be addressed. When Nathan comes to David to set something in a different light so he'll see it, he tells him a story about a guy who abused his neighbor by stealing his pet lamb and killing it and feeding it to somebody else. And David gets so angry, right? That is righteous indignation that wells up within him. And Nathan goes, and that guy's you. Ooh. But that was not a self-protective or a self-indulgent anger. It was rising up. There's a difference between what is welling up because of the Spirit and what is worked up because I just want to be angry. Jesus is about to do a miracle. This is in Mark 3. And everyone around him is so hard-hearted. They don't want him to do it. They're going to judge him. They don't want the guy to be healed. And it says, Jesus looked around them in great anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. That's a really critical coupling. We'll come back to anger and grief. Right? There's a place and there's a time when anger is actually the right response. Be careful, though. Be careful. As I have wrestled with it, I've not done a deep dive on the biblical theology of anger. It's not been an area of particular focus for me, but I have thought about it a good deal. I have read this from cover to cover attentively every single year since I was a young adult, which means more than 40 times right now. And I just can't think of a single time. I might be missing something, but I cannot think of a single time that anger shows up on a virtue list. But I can think of multiple times where it shows up on a vice list. So be careful. Is there a place for anger that is a righteous indignation? Yes. Is that likely? No, actually, it's pretty uncommon. When it's needed, it's needed. And it is something that I think, coming back to Jesus, Jesus is the perfect example. Moses is another one who has these moments of righteous indignation. And you look in the book of Numbers, chapter 12, it says a most extraordinary thing. It says that Moses was the meekest man in all the earth. In Matthew, Jesus says, take my yoke upon you. My burden is easy, right? It's light. I am gentle and humble of heart. Gentle is the same word as meek, right? I think if I'm going to have righteous indignation, that anger has to coexist and be coextensive with a meek heart. I don't see how you can separate those. If I am angry and there's not a meekness in it, I am almost certainly in sin. Because a meek person is not weak. It's not a pushover. It's not ignoring what is right and wrong. They're just not in it for themselves. They're actually in it for what's right and wrong. And they have a very clear sense, in the scripturally meek person, very clear sense of God is sovereign. And he is working, and he has got this. And if I'm partnering with him and things are welling up within me, that's fine. But if the world is swirling around me and I'm just getting in a rage because I somehow have to fix it, I have fallen into idolatry. I may not realize it, but I'm convinced actually that a whole lot of anger comes out of idolatry. Because I think I ought to control things, I think I ought to shift things, I don't like things, and it may even be that I'm not like being super selfish and a jerk. I may actually have more or less good intentions, but my heart is still not humble before God. It is me. When I'm in traffic, for instance, which is one of my vulnerable points, it is an affront to me in my driving when they're doing that. There's something that's crossed a line there, right? I think a lot of anger comes from there. We have to be really, really careful. Slow anger, not no anger. Let me read one more verse that I think is also important as we talk about our dealing with anger. Chapter 29, verse 11. It says, a fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. That's a verse we really need to take to heart, because we live in a culture that says if you have an emotion, it is valid. So let me take a knife and split that. Yes, it is absolutely valid in one sense. That's your emotion. That's what you're feeling. You have to be honest with that. You can't hide it. You can't run from it. It's where you are. Absolutely, you must start from truth. Don't get all worked up that you're all worked up. Just know that you're all worked up. But then what next? Because it's not just the emotion, it's where's that arising from? And I may need to be fully honest, but I also may need to be ready to repent. Because every emotion and thing that I feel is not rooted necessarily in a good place. And the ultimate arbiter of right and wrong, virtuous and vice is not me. And authenticity, as it's commonly thought about, is self-indulgent. It's trying to correct from something that's equally bad, that's kind of putting on a show and pretending and playing a game. Don't do that. Be honest, be real, own it. This is where I am. God's not threatened by that. God's not put off by that. God's not afraid of my emotions. But that doesn't mean that they are rooted in valid things. And there may be things within me that are wrong. And the proverb says, look, it's a wise person that doesn't just, oh, here it is, I'm going to pour it all out. And don't do that. Remember the smoke detector. What's going on? What do I need to do? I need to be honest. Always start from honesty. Take whatever you've got to God. And even if your emotion is rooted in something that's sinful, oh, well, you still got to start there. I still have to start there. That's where I am. God will never bless me where I'm going to be. He's always going to bless me where I am. Right? He's never going to meet me where I'm going to be. He's always going to meet me where I am. That's where I am. But don't wallow in it. Let God speak to it. So there is such a thing as righteous indignation, but I've got to be really careful. The other thing that Proverbs makes really clear for us is I need to be careful with the voices in my head. Look over at chapter 22. This one's really, really timely. 22 verse 24. Make no friendship. I think that might even include Facebook friendship. Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare. The voices around me are raging, and they are manipulating through rage. They are working to keep me worked up. Right? We have terms for these things because they're a thing and they're obvious, like rage baiting, where you just pick a fight. You're going to get a reaction. Either I want you on my side, so I'm going to trigger. We also have something that goes with that called nut picking, right? When I'm making an argument and there's another side, I will look for the crazies over there. And I'll pick 2 or 3 of the nuts and hold them up as the example of the whole thing. So you'll get mad at the whole thing. It's like the whole position doesn't hold these ideas. It's these 3 crazies here. But we pulled them forward and held them up as the example. That's actually a thing. It's called nut picking. It's part of rage baiting and the bigger dynamic of rage farming, where I'm just trying to cultivate rage, to keep you on my side, to keep people engaged, to keep us going. We can get more passion out as we get people angrier, and we can accomplish what we want to accomplish. That's our world. And here it says, don't be friends with that. Don't be friends with that. How do I do that? Well, for some of us, I may need to stop listening to my favorite podcast. I may need to stop responding to certain posts. I may need to stop listening to my preferred news source on broadcast. Right? Here's a test for you if you're talking about broadcast. Leave the room, go out of the room far enough to where you can't discern what they're actually saying and just pick up the tone. That'll be eye-opening if you've never done that. The amount of stuff that's supposedly news that is just stirring anger and fear, and it's all to try to manipulate. Wow, and here he says, don't be friends with that. I may need to change some things. I may need to pull away from some relationships, or I may need to speak in differently, right? This is a real relationship. I don't walk away from it. Great. How about if I be the one, if I don't disengage, I be the one to de-escalate? I be the one to try to calm things down a little bit. Try to speak with a little more modesty. Try to ask a question and actually be open to an answer from somebody I don't like. And maybe I don't agree with, but maybe they're right. And I help that to kind of get into the conversation. Remember, it says, answer a fool according to his folly. Don't answer a fool according to his folly. Charlie unpacked that a little bit, right? Those two verses are paired. So there's a time to do one, there's a time to do the other. But always, I need to be attentive to the fact that I am soaking in a culture that is seething with anger, using it as a manipulative tool. I mean, trying to manipulate me. There was a major Christian leader I saw, some comment he made. I don't know how it got onto the thing. It was a Twitter or something. And must have been Instagram because it was a video, very short. But he was talking about his upset at something and how every other godly Christian leader needed to be upset. And if you weren't upset, you were a coward or a compromiser. It's like, no, that's not true. And what you're doing is actually called bullying. And I'm not going to be bullied. Don't be bullied. There's not either my way or compromise. Unless you're God. There's not either my way or you're a coward. It's not a... Ephesians says, put away anger. Colossians says, put away anger, put on love. The fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, gentleness, meekness, kindness, self-control. Read just a little earlier. What are the issues surrounding the flesh? Right in the center of the list is rooted in anger. The wisdom that is from above is first, well, it's a lot of things, but it's peaceable. It's reasonable, right? And the agitated anger, self-will stuff is actually called out in that section of James as from hell. Boy, I want to be really careful. I live in a culture that is holding up what is actually from hell as if it were virtuous. And it's trying to bully me into saying, you need to take this same tone. I don't. Is there time and a place for me to be angry? Yes. Absolutely. But I really need to be careful. And I think if I'm angry and I'm not meek, I need to stop. Whatever else is going on, I need to stop because I'm not lined up with God. So as we try to navigate this, we have our own personal bent, but when we're in this culture that's pushing us, relentlessly pushing us in a direction, we have to be careful because we want to be the ones with great understanding, not the ones who are exalting folly. So we're going to pray. We're going to take our offering. What do we do? I'm going to ask the ushers to come, and the prayer team will be right behind them. Listen, there's a couple of things that I think are fruitful if you're trying to wrestle with anger. One, it's the fruit of the Spirit that kind of counters that. So there may be need, especially if I've got a particularly challenging problem. I may need all kinds of tools. I may need therapy. There's things that I may need to do. That's true. But I need to lean into the Spirit so that the fruit of the Spirit grows in me. And I need to stop shutting him down because it feels good to get angry at something that maybe I shouldn't. That's one thing. Another thing is because I'm convinced, and I think this is intuitive for most of us if we really think about it, a lot of our anger arises out of idolatry, the need for control and an irritation, frustration, whatever, that I'm not in control or it's not going the way I want. Meekness has to be rooted in the sovereignty of God. I have to come back to the fact that this is God's world and he is in control, and I continue to entrust myself to that. I act. Sometimes I even act boldly. But remember what it says about Jesus in 1 Peter 2. He kept entrusting himself to the one who judges righteously. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return because he wasn't focused on how he felt. He was focused on what God wanted. And that allowed him to be meek in that very difficult circumstance. That's what I need to. And I think that plays on the grand scale, and I think that plays on the little scale too. because so much of my anger arises out of frustration of things that I want different. It's okay to try to work to make things different. It's okay to ask God to make things different, but what if it's not going to happen? What if it's his will? Am I at peace? Can I be meek? As we sing these songs, there's an opportunity for you to come and have somebody pray with you. Let me just encourage you. There's a couple of different things that you may want. You may find yourself as one who actually has a problem. It would be good to have some help. It'd be good to have somebody pray for you. If you need something more complex and help, please, by all means, get it. And if we can help you connect you with that, we will. But maybe it even just comes down to just good spiritual community where you're sharing your journey with people honestly, and they're praying with you and supporting you. You may be one who has kind of the occasional thing that comes up. It's like, I've got this area, this challenge, this, or you may be one who's actually got a situation. You know, you don't have a problem, you have a situation. And the situation is, I'm living with this person, I'm in this setting where they've got the issue and I'm trying to navigate that. Would you pray for me? Would you help me? Would you ask God's blessing on me that I would be able to walk and not respond in kind, or that I would be able to endure, or that I'd be able to find a way of escape, whatever it is. That's another thing we can do. You also may be one who's been deeply hurt because of somebody else's anger, and you just need some healing. We have a prayer team here. They'd love to pray with you about any of those things. It could be something completely different. God is not limited to my words, what he might be doing in your heart. As we're singing, here's an opportunity to come and have somebody pray with you. Lord, thank you for your blessing and your grace in our lives. We just ask that you would work. We so desperately need you. Would you meet us? Lord, as we give these gifts, we offer them to you. Ask that you would use them for the sake of your name, for the good of your people, for the progress of the gospel. In Jesus' name, amen.